Welcome to the Ethics of Innovation, part of Ethics Unfiltered. In the last episode, we looked at why research ethics exists, how events like the Holocaust and the Tuskegee study forced the world to confront the devastating consequences of research without oversight. If you chose to skip that episode, I totally understand. It covered some of the hardest history in modern science. But the good news is, you can jump in right here. This episode is about how those tragedies became turning points, about how the principles of informed consent, beneficence, and justice weren't just written down, they were built into real systems. The Declaration of Helsinki, and what most researchers today know as the IRB, or the Institutional Review Board. This isn't just about historical memory, it's about how ethical review shapes the research we do right now, and why it's not just a formality. It's a system that protects people, including you. Let's walk through how ethics went from reaction to regulation, and what it means when we say that science doesn't just have a responsibility to ask questions, it has a responsibility to ask them well. We've talked about how the Nuremberg Code laid the foundation for research ethics. Clear rules that said, you can't do this to people, even in the name of science. But Nuremberg was just the beginning. It was a post-war document, written in reaction to atrocities. It laid down essential principles, but it didn't answer every question researchers would face moving forward. Real-world science isn't static. What about long-term studies? What if treatments evolve during the study period? What about participants who can't give consent themselves? Nuremberg didn't provide detailed answers to these scenarios, and it wasn't designed to. It was a moral line in the sand, but science kept moving, and the ethics needed to evolve with it. So, in 1964, the World Medical Association adopted the Declaration of Helsinki. Where Nuremberg spoke to the world as a court of law, Helsinki spoke to physicians as a professional code of conduct. It moved ethics into the realm of everyday research, clinical trials, behavioral studies, emerging technologies, and began asking deeper questions. How do you balance risks and benefits? What responsibilities do you have to your subjects after the study ends? What if the best available treatment isn't available in the region where you're conducting the research? The Declaration introduced concepts like ongoing informed consent, because one signature isn't the end of the conversation, and post-trial access, because subjects shouldn't be abandoned after the study is over. It also emphasized that the well-being of the human subject must take precedence over the interests of science and society. And that line alone is revolutionary. The Declaration of Helsinki is a living document, updated as medical research changes. 2024 marked the Declaration's 60th anniversary, and it was once again updated in the city where it started, Helsinki, Finland. It's proof that ethics doesn't retire, it updates. That last revision sharpened its stance on post-trial responsibilities and emphasized protecting participants throughout the research journey, not just during recruitment or consent. So if you're wondering whether ethics still adapts to modern medicine, the answer is yes. It's still happening, it's still listening, and it's still reminding us science serves people, not the other way around. Let's connect the dots so far. The Nuremberg Code was the never again moment. Clear, strict, reactive. The Belmont Report added moral structure after a slow-burning crisis like Tuskegee. The Declaration of Helsinki made it practical, professional, and international. If Nuremberg was the seatbelt and Belmont was the GPS, Helsinki is the maintenance manual, the thing that keeps the whole thing running long-term through complexity, uncertainty, and change. That's what ethics is for. Not to stop research, but to make sure it moves in the right direction. Carefully, transparently, and with the people involved treated as human beings and not raw material. By now, we've looked at the major ethical documents that emerged in response to real harm: Nuremberg, Helsinki, and Belmont. They gave us principles, things like consent, transparency, and minimizing harm. But principles only go so far without a structure to apply them. That's where IRBs come in. IRB stands for Institutional Review Board. Depending on where you are, you might also hear Ethics Committee or Research Ethics Board, but the function is the same. It's a formal, independent group that reviews research proposals involving people and sometimes animals to make sure they meet ethical standards before the study begins. An IRB doesn't just rubber stamp your study. It looks at the risks, the benefits, the consent process, how participants are recruited, how data is handled, and what happens if something goes wrong. And critically, it doesn't just rely on the researcher's good intentions. It asks questions like, are participants being fully informed in language they can understand? Is there any form of coercion, financial, social, or otherwise? If a risk exists, is it justified by a potential benefit? And is that benefit reaching the participants or just the institution? What happens after the study ends? You don't get to answer those questions after you've already run the study. You answer them before it starts, and the IRB has the authority to say no. Here's something a lot of people don't realize. An IRB can't be your cheerleading squad. If everyone on your ethics board works for your company or reports to your primary investigator, that's not oversight, that's a conflict of interest. The whole point of IRBs is that they come with distance. Someone who isn't invested in the outcome of your research needs to take a hard look and ask, are you protecting people? Are you being fair? Have you thought this through? If the answer is not really, then the study doesn't move forward. It's not personal. It's structural. When I submitted a study on diagnostic imaging for visually impaired patients, the IRB didn't ask much about the imaging itself. They assumed the science was sound. What they wanted to know was, what eye drops are you using? What are the risks? What happens if someone has an adverse reaction? How do you explain this to someone who already has low vision? That was the core concern, not whether the study was publishable, but whether it was safe, transparent, and ethical. And that's exactly how it should be. It can be tempting, especially in tech or startup spaces, to see IRBs as a hurdle, something you bypass by calling your project development or optimization, or just an internal tool. But the truth is, if your work involves human bodies, brains, or behavior in any meaningful way, it probably needs review. Because ethics isn't a cage, it's a compass. It's what keeps progress from turning into exploitation. And IRBs aren't there to slow you down. They're there to make sure that if you do move forward, you're not dragging someone else's safety behind you. One of the most common things you'll hear when ethical concerns are raised about a new piece of research or a flashy tech project is some version of, you just don't understand the science. And sometimes, that's true. Most of us aren't virologists or neuroscientists or behavioral economists. But the thing is, you don't have to be. That's the whole point. The ethics review process is specifically designed to include people who aren't subject matter experts. Every IRB includes what is called a non-scientist member, someone from the community who can ask the simple questions, the human ones. Does this feel coercive? Is the information clear? Would I be okay with someone doing this to me or someone I love? These aren't uninformed questions. They are the ethical foundation. Because if a study only looks good when it's hidden behind jargon, or it falls apart the moment someone outside the bubble asks, "Wait, is this okay?" That's not robust science. That's a red flag. It's easy to fall into the trap of seeing research ethics as just more paperwork, a box to tick before you publish. But what ethics really is a system of accountability that keeps science aligned with humanity. It's not there to stop discovery, it's there to make sure discovery isn't built on harm. And if the only way your project works is by bypassing ethics review, avoiding transparency, or hoping no one asks too many questions, then it probably doesn't work the way you think it does. Ethics in research doesn't stop at the individual. It starts there. Once you've built a process that respects human subjects, consent, safety, justice, you start to realize that the same questions need to be asked on a larger scale too. Especially when your work isn't just about treating one person, but about altering something fundamental. Think genetic engineering, synthetic biology, neurotech that changes how people think or behave. Projects that could affect not just individuals, but entire populations or ecosystems. Suddenly, the question isn't just, is this safe for the person involved? It becomes, what happens if this spreads? What if this self-replicates? And what is the impact 10 years from now on people who never consented? At that point, ethics doesn't look like a consent form. It looks like international agreements, risk assessments, biosafety treaties, whole fields of oversight designed to ask, what if this changes more than you meant to? What we've seen today is that research ethics didn't just appear because people were being cautious. It was built in response to harm, real harm with lasting consequences. And the systems we have now, like IRBs, weren't designed to protect science, they were designed to protect people. They exist to make sure that no matter how exciting an idea is, it doesn't move forward without being examined carefully, thoughtfully, and by people who can say no. If your science can't hold up to ethical scrutiny, it doesn't matter how innovative it is, it's not ready. Next time, we'll talk about what happens when research crosses not just ethical boundaries, but biological ones. When you're editing genes, altering environments, or releasing modified organisms into the world. We'll get into genetic engineering, ecosystem ethics, and the international frameworks that try to keep the balance. Because when your experiment can affect more than just your lab subjects, everyone becomes a stakeholder.